No.
All right, so we're going to have our first speaker coming up, and well, second speaker, I guess Alistair and I spoke. We'll have our second speaker coming up, and we're going to have our Humane Hoax team introducing the speakers. So we're going to start with Fireweed. Fireweed is an ecofeminist and grassroots activist. She's featured on the latest Humane Hope for the Animals podcast, talking about the Humane Hoax. So Fireweed.
Thank you, Hope. I'm honored to have the opportunity today to introduce a true legend in the animal advocacy community. Karen Davis, Ph.D., is the president and founder of United Poultry Concerns, a nonprofit organization that promotes the compassionate and respectful treatment of domestic fowl, including a very impressive sanctuary for chickens in Virginia. In 2022, Karen was introduced into the National Animal Rights Hall of Fame for outstanding contributions to animal liberation. She is the author of numerous books. I'll just mention her latest here, published by Lantern. It's titled For the Birds, From Exploitation to Liberation, and I highly recommend this book. Karen has also penned countless articles, contributed op-eds and inspiring essays to literally dozens of publications, including several other anthologies. She's hosted many conferences, presented on various panels, and raised consciousness with her expertise on radio and television over decades. On a personal note, I'd just like to add that almost half a lifetime ago, I happened upon what must have been one of the very first newsletters for United Poultry Concerns, Karen, while browsing in a radical bookstore in Western Canada. Not only did your words open my eyes to the plight of domestic fowl back then, it personalized their lives in a way that forever changed how I would think about these sensitive and fascinating birds. Over 30 years later, I'm thrilled to still be learning so much from this compelling and incredibly knowledgeable writer and activist. Welcome, Karen, to the 2023 Humane Hoax Conference.
Thank you, and thank you for this very kind introduction. I'm very grateful for it, and for you, and to be part of this wonderful panel, and to be a contributor to this fantastic book, which I have not read yet, but I'm still waiting for a review copy to come along, and I plan to read it very closely and carefully and review it on Amazon, and certainly post a review on our to our members at United Poultry Concerns. So just a couple preliminary things here. I am going to speak about issues that I discuss in my chapter in the Humane Hoax anthology. One of the important things here is that, as Hope and Alistair have brought out, is the fact that the animal agribusiness is a seamless industry. It really doesn't matter, as they have pointed out, whether we're talking about so-called humane this or grass-fed that or whatever, factory farming, whatever labels we use. This is an industry that is a seamless industry. And so even when you see situations where, well, you know, the chickens are in the backyard. Well, where did they come from? Well, actually, they came from a factory farm hatchery somewhere. Actually, they were flown as airmail to get to the Postal Service office. It is really a terrible, sad thing, the whole backyard chicken keeping phenomenon alone. So it's all related, the whole industry, and you can't really separate out the strands for like what is the humane part and what isn't, because again, as Hope has brought out, you have an industry that's based on killing. You have an industry that's based upon bringing living beings into the world to be killed. To be exploited in the worst possible ways. One of the things that is very interesting, and just seeing the various images today of the kinds of labeling that these so-called humane animal products are represented to the public in terms of, is the extent to which animals aren't even mentioned in them. They talk about humanely raised beef, humanely raised eggs, humanely raised veal. So you're seeing veal. Well, you cannot raise veal because veal is the dead body part of a calf. So you cannot raise eggs. You can only raise chickens or hens. And you cannot pasture raise beef. You raise cows or goats or whoever the particular animal in question may be. So I think that one thing to consider as we look at these labels and these marketing ploys is the fact that every effort is made to disappear the animals from view and from consciousness, to focus just on the veal, the eggs, the chicken, as opposed to the chickens. I've always said there's a difference in thinking about having eating a chicken leg versus eating a chicken's leg. That reattaches that body part to somebody who was alive and who had a leg that you're now chomping on. Another thing I thought I would bring out is the fact that a few weeks ago, I published a letter to the editor in a newspaper in Maine, just clarifying briefly some things about cage-free egg production and cage-free hens and how they actually live. And it was interesting to read the comments following the online publication of the letter, how hostile people were. It was like they were saying, look, I've gone to the trouble of paying more money for cage-free eggs, and now you're suggesting that they're not humane. Well, they were just sort of angry about it, that now they feel like you're ruining what they feel good about doing. And they don't want to hear about what hens like to do. Like I said in the letter, for example, you know, the hens, cage-free hens, they're not in wire cages, but they never go outside either. They're always locked in a building for their entire life until they're grabbed and thrown into transport crates and sent to a slaughterhouse or something. And they, you know, and chickens love to sunbathe and dust bathe, and cage-free hens never get a chance to do that. And it was like, that made people mad. They're like, I don't care whether they can sunbathe and dust bathe. They're cage free. Hey, that's all I need to read. And I'm paying more money for that. So, you know, go away, lady, and quit bothering us. Again, I'm only slightly exaggerating the animus that seemed to be directed toward this, this letter to the editor that I wrote, just making a few points. And it's like, we don't want to hear that. So we have to understand that what we are up against, of course, with these industries and their labeling and their lies, but the what I have to say is the readiness of the public to be deceived, and even the anger toward you instead of the deceivers. You know, they're madder at you than they are at the people who are telling them lies and taking all this money for a situation that is really not quite as it's represented at all. Well, I am going to talk about the investigations that I discuss in my chapter in the Humane Hoax on what is it, Happy Meals, Happy Wings, all of that. And again, even think in the chicken industry, and even in our own movement. You hear people refer to chickens as broilers. They don't even call them broiler chickens sometimes. They talk about them as just broilers. Well, how can you relate to a broiler? If you're just an average person going to the supermarket or you read an article about broilers. So we as a movement have to be more careful about how we speak about the animals for whom we are advocating. We should never call them broilers. We should never refer to veal calf crates as veal crates. No, they're at least use the noun to bring the animal into consciousness. If you have to say broiler chickens, egg-laying hens. I mean, again, we're stuck with a vocabulary that's very difficult to navigate without sounding weird or using too many words to try to say something simple. But we have to work that out. That's one of the things that as animal advocates and activists, we have to do, is to find a language that puts the animals themselves into the consciousness and the perception of the public. We can't refer to them as broilers and layers and that type of thing. We have to really think about how we're identifying these animals when we speak about them. And we owe them the respect to at least say chickens, to at least say hens, to at least say calves, to at least say cows, even words like livestock. I mean, I basically never use the term livestock. Livestock means live assets, live wealth, as opposed to the wealth that you have in the bank or the savings and loan or wherever, or in whatever kind of investment account. Livestock means live assets. It's your property. And it's a very, it's a word that does not connect a person to the animals themselves. And we had a discussion, Hope and I and a couple other people a number of years ago, because somebody had criticized something I wrote, or maybe Hope wrote, I don't remember, but where we use the term cows to refer to both male and female cows, cattle. Cattle is a terrible word. Again, nobody relates to cattle. And who relates to the term steer? A castrated bull. So we have to find ways. Again, we both said, well, cows is a more relatable word than cattle. And I said, even the industry uses the term cows often to refer to both the male and female adult bovine beings. Again, we have to be conscious of the language we use because it really, really matters. So in the book, I talk about 2 visits I made initially. When I first started United Poultry Concerns back in 1990, 2 of the first visits I made to learn more about what was then kind of coming into being, I guess you'd say, as far as marketing is concerned, and that is cage-free eggs, cage-free hens, and cage-free alternatives to so-called factory farm hens and factory farm eggs. So I and several of our staff people at the time, we visited 2 cage-free operations in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. The first one was Souders, which is a huge egg corporation in Pennsylvania, and I believe they have operations in other states as well. It's Sauders. They're a huge battery hen operation, and they also have these niche markets like cage-free. And the other one was actually called the Happy Hen, Pleasant View Farms, that has a brand called the Happy Hen. So we visited on 2 separate occasions these 2 operations. And Souders, we visited a cage-free house where there were something like 20,000 hens in the house, very, very crowded, very severely debeaked. Virtually all of these hens people purchase for backyard chicken keeping or so-called happy hens or humanely raised hens or whatever are always almost automatically debeaked, beak trimmed at the hatchery. Usually their upper beak, their upper mandible is sliced off or lasered off or something. So that's just almost routinely done. Even if these particular hens are not going to live crowded in a battery cage or a cage-free operation, but are going to live presumably in a somewhat spacious backyard, they're still debeaked at the hatchery. And as most people, I think, listening to this know, the beak of a bird is an extremely sensitive organ. It navigates the environment. Chickens and turkeys and other ground nesting birds, they explore the ground with their beaks, and their beaks are full of nerve endings long before they're even born. So debeaking has been described, I think, accurately as, even after the beak has healed, so to speak, as an experience like phantom limb pain, where the hen feels the part of the beak that belongs there that has been hacked off or burned off. So that's something to keep in mind. So these hens at Souders, they were all debeaked to various degrees. I mean, we've had hens in our sanctuary, and I've seen hens at these different kinds of, in these various facilities, who have only a nub under their nose. That's how badly debeaked they often are. Because consider the fact that, for example, traditionally with debeaking, you have, which goes back to the 1940s when it really began in earnest in San Diego County, California, according to the legends. But anyway, you've got somebody sitting there and he or she is just taking one bird after another and holding them up to this guillotine, and it slices down, they throw them into a bin, the next one, and they're paid by how fast they go. So, you know, the beaks, often the bird's tongue gets burned off. It's a terrible operation. And with the laser beams, it's like they shoot a laser into them and they're on this carousel. If you see chickens and turkeys they're hanging there and they're having a laser go into their beak. And then like within the next couple of weeks, the beak crumbles off. And I mean, how does that feel to be a bird and have your beak crumbling off by pieces? Well, anyway, I think you get the picture. So at Souders, we met the manager and we talked about, it was either at Souders or the Happy Hen, because they were very, very similar places, as all these places are. And when I mentioned the fact of how badly the birds looked, and I think that was actually the Happy Hen, which was the worst, how badly how defeathered they were. They had a lot of raw skin, no feather areas with no feathers at all, and they looked very, very poorly. And he said, well, we have a saying in the industry, the rougher they look, the better they lay. And he said it in a jaunty way, the better they look, the rougher they look, the better they lay. And we're like, oh, yeah. Well, that makes sense. See, at that time, we didn't quite expose who we were. We just said we were just some citizens who had we learned about Souders or Happy Hen, and we were just curious to see for ourselves. And we were really interested in what kind of eggs these hens produced and how the hens were kept and everything. So, they were like almost eager to show us around, and they were proud of what they have, how they keep the hens. And since they thought we were pretty amenable to what they were, how they raised these hens, as opposed to the wire cages, they were pretty talkative and pretty eager to explain to us about, for example, the forced molting of the chickens, which is taking all their food away anywhere from 4 days straight to 14 days straight, and to manipulate the economics of egg production. And they say, well, the hens don't really mind. They always say that. They don't really mind not having any food for 14 days. That gives their body a chance to rest from having to lay all those eggs. So actually, it's a welfare measure for the good of the hens. And they will always tell you that everything they do is for the good of the hens or the good of the chickens or whatever animal it may be. They'll say that animal actually is getting better welfare by this mutilation or this or that method of somehow harming them than if you didn't do that to them. So the Happy Hen, Bill Moyer's place, the Happy Hen was really the most wretched of all. It was a June day, and there were 3 houses right next to each other, long houses, 500-foot long houses, maybe 12 feet across. And when he drove us up, it was a leafy day in June. It was a beautiful sunny day. And as all of these hens, and there were also, for every 10 hens, there was a rooster, something like that in there. And so you heard crowing as well as the hens clucking or vocalizing. But they were those who were close to the screening were also like almost smashed up against it, that looking out. And here is all this greenery around them, and they're in this house, wall to wall, beak to beak, debeaked beak to beak, and it's so sad, because when you go in there, the hens, And of course, as I say, Happy Hen had roosters as well, crowing amongst the hens. And they were in very bad physical shape too, as far as the defeathering and everything. They're kind of eager for the company to see you. And it's just so sad to realize, not only is this their life, not only are they looking out through a screen to a world that they belong in, that they're never going to be allowed to enjoy, but what awaits them? Well, as soon as they become about 18 months old, there's 6 months to grow up and be ready to lay eggs, and then a year of laying eggs. And then they're going to be grabbed by their legs and they're going to be thrust into transport crates, or they're going to go into mobile killing units where they're going to be gassed with carbon dioxide. So that's how they're treated. And so what is looking ahead for these hens, the horror of the death, and even in the so-called most broadly speaking animal advocacy community, the organizations that promote certified humane or humane certified or some name along that line for various egg producing enterprises, they never show you the killing, the gathering up of the chickens, the throwing them upside down, throwing them into the kill carts or the transport crates. Notice they never show that. In fact, I have a magazine from one of these organizations, Animal Welfare Institute, and one of these issues has a beautiful picture on the front of the hens, these brown hens, cage-free or free range, in that case, hens outdoors running through the grass. And that's very lovely. But what they don't show you is the whole truth. They don't show you where the hens came from. They don't show you the debeaking. And they don't show you, I cannot recall whether those particular hens that AWI certifies as humane were beak trimmed or debeaked. I just can't recall, but normally they are. But the point is, they don't show you what happens when these hens reach less than 2 years of age, how roughly they are going to be treated. And here's something that many people are not aware of, that constantly the hens who, for example, are being raised as cage-free or free range are salvaged. That is, if there's another facility somewhere or another egg company that needs some more hens in their facility, they will salvage these hens and send them off to this other operation, which could be a battery cage facility or another so-called cage-free operation. And this is a commonplace amongst in the egg industry. Another thing the egg industry will do, for example, like Souders, who has like millions of battery caged hens, along with their cage-free hens, many fewer of those, is if they don't have enough cage-free eggs to fill up the egg cartons, they'll just take some eggs from the battery caged hens. I mean, who's going to know? Who's checking up on that stuff? So, I mean, another thing is that nobody really monitors these operations. These so-called certified humane certified, like animal, what is it? Animal, whatever. They don't do their own certifications. They farm that out to some company that really the people who do the certifying, if they actually even go to the farm, they don't even know what they're looking at. You know, they don't know chickens. These are just people like business people or something. So they go and they look at it. It looks okay to me, you know, it looks, and again, they're not watching the killing, because the killing isn't even part of what is comprised in the marketing of cage-free and free-range birds. That's a whole separate thing that nobody is monitoring that, because her certified humane certified do not include the killing part or the grabbing of them and throwing them into these gas killing carts or these transport crates that might be taking them hundreds of miles hundreds of miles into another state to maybe another operation, to live another 6 months there. So this is what goes on all the time. This is a ruthless business. There is no compassion in it. It's all about the money, and that's what it is. And it's all about the money, and they will do whatever they can to save money and make money. And that's exactly the kind of business that it is. And I always tell people, humane slavery wasn't humane. We know that from all of the documentation, or if you just read Uncle Tom's Cabin, you get a very clear picture of the details of how inhumane human as enslavement was. How does anybody think that non-human animals enslavement would be somehow more humane? It's just ludicrous. But again, people want to be deceived. They do. They want to be deceived. In fact, I just read an article from a newspaper in the United Kingdom a few weeks ago, and it was interesting. It was talking about how talking to and interviewing people who are shopping at the meat counter in these various supermarkets or big box stores in the UK, how they say, frankly, they do not want to know how the animals are raised or slaughtered. What they're saying is, first of all, I know it's bad, so don't tell me about it. So they're admitting they know it's really bad. That's one thing. The other thing that the article brought out was that they say that it makes them feel guilty when they're buying their meat. This article particularly focused on the people buying the flesh of animals rather than the eggs, as I recall. It doesn't stop them learning or knowing about what these animals go through enough to at least be disturbed enough to not want to know about it or hear about it. But it's not stopping them from wanting to buy the product. It's just making them feel guilty while they buy the product anyway. So again, that's something else that we have to keep in mind when we're talking about how to reach the public with the public's own desire not to know what they know or not to hear what they know. They're saying, well, I want to buy meat. I just don't want to feel guilty about it. So anyway, now, the other big campaign, free range investigation and campaign that we became involved in started in 2009 and went through 2011. And a lawyer in Virginia, we're based here in Virginia, on the Eastern Shore of Virginia, and with our sanctuary. We're here because of the sanctuary down here in rural Virginia, our chicken sanctuary. And as I always remind people, we're in the birthplace of the broiler chicken industry, the Eastern Shore of Delaware, Virginia, and Maryland. It's called the Delmarva Peninsula, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia. This is where the chicken industry, the chicken meat industry, became established in the 1920s. So, what was I starting to say here? Well, anyway, so I got this email or a phone call from this lawyer here in Virginia who said, are you aware of this organic farm in Nelson County, Virginia, called Black Eagle Farm? And I said, no. And she said, well, you might be interested in looking into this place and maybe even, visiting it or getting in touch with the state veterinarians about it. She said, because how I learned about it was that somebody contacted me about seeing some very emaciated dogs running around on the Black Eagle Farm property. And I think they also saw maybe a couple of sheep also looking in very poor condition. So she said, so we called the Nelson County Humane Society to come and take a look at these dogs, and again, maybe a sheep or two, and to get involved in this. And she said, and lo and behold, we discovered there was a building filled with 25,000 hens, brown hens, so-called cage-free organic hens, who were either dead or dying, who had no food at all. And she said, we just came upon this facility by accident. And so it turns out there's an owner an absentee owner named Ralph Glatt, G-L-A-T-T, Ralph Glatt. And he's some type of a geneticist or a biologist who apparently was in Germany at the time. And a manager was to be looking after the hens, and I guess the whole place. And in any case, it was we contacted the state veterinarians here in Virginia, and this lawyer had also done so. And so I did a Freedom of Information Act request, and I got all these emails back and forth amongst these Virginia state veterinarians. And just to read these emails again is itself just so eye-opening. How this was right before Christmas. This was in December of 2009. So these veterinarians are just so cavalier about it all. Well, we can't depop them until after the new year, and then, they'll go to, the processing plants in North Carolina and Delaware, wherever, and again, that's another thing, again, I want to emphasize how much traveling these birds do to get to their final destination of slaughter, or again, to be salvaged into yet another operation before they go to slaughter, unless they die prematurely, which is the best thing that can happen to them, since the slaughter operation is complete torture. But anyway, so these veterinarians, they go back and forth in these emails about how we're going to depop it after Christmas, and then the hens will go here and they'll go there and whatnot. And again, there's no sign of any compassion for these hens or anything. What they did was they ordered like a ton of corn to tide the hens over until they would be depopulated, which they call depopping. So they ordered a ton of corn, and I guess threw that into the feed troughs. And presumably they saw that the hens had some water to drink out of those nipple drinkers that hang over top, those plastic nipple drinkers where they can only get one drop of water at a time. They have to lift their heads up and drink one drop of water at a time. Because again, for the convenience of the farm, you've got all these chickens all crowded together. Well, they like to drink water, and they like to, slosh it around with their beaks and everything. So that makes a mess in an enclosed environment. So that's they don't want them to have water for that reason, other than one nipple drop at a time. And this is true for all of the birds, whether they're raised for meat, whether they're turkeys or chickens or whoever they are raised for eggs. So anyway, we got to know this guy who is Bob, whatever his name was, who he's some kind of an entrepreneur. He moves birds around, or he arranges for the birds to move around and all of that. And he made, when finally I and Franklin Wade and Leach and Chow, our two vice presidents, when we all met with him to see, this was in 2011, how changed for the better the Black Eagle hens were now, how the units were all filled, each one 25,000. There's the cage-free and the cage-free organic and the regular organic, and they have all these different this nomenclature for these different so-called ways the hens are marketed. So we stopped and we ate breakfast with him, and he was eager to tell us, how he's a good Christian man, and he's adopted children from, I don't know, Vietnam or Japan or something. And he was very, kind of eager for us to understand that, I'm not a bad person, I'm a Christian, and I adopt children who come from bad situations. But I have to say that toward the hens, now he was a pleasant person as far as his personality was concerned. He wasn't a hothead or a mean guy or swaggering around or anything like that. But the thing is, once we got into the units, first of all, he said, we cannot go into any of the units, each of which had 25,000 hens. He said, because we don't want to track germs, salmonella or something like that into the units. So we said, you can look through the these windows, and you can look at them there. So for example, the organic hens, these were all brown hens, not the white leghorn hens, but all brown hens. And so you're looking at the brown organic hens. So they have not only floor systems, but what they have platforms. So one of the things about these platforms that the industry likes to promote as more humane, okay, because the hens are not only on the floor, but they're also able to fly up to be on platforms, and they can go behind a little plastic or canvas curtain and lay their eggs back there. Although there's not a real nest, it's just like a little plastic thing back there. But the problem is there are so many hens in both on the floor and in these tiers. There may be 1 or 2 tiers, and they're just loaded with hens. So what happens is when if a hen wants to jump up to the next tier, she basically cannot do that without maybe fracturing a wing or a leg or something, because there's no place to land. And if she wants to jump down, the same problem exists. She's looking for a place to land. Now, I've been keeping chickens since 1985, and I've watched them get ready to leap up on a branch of a tree or up on a fence railing or up on whatever, and to find a place to land, like at night on a chicken ladder. They like especially to be to roost at night on the highest rung of the chicken ladder. So they're very careful, each chicken, to know that she has a place to land where she's not going to be landing on top of another chicken. And they're very, very able to land very precisely. But here are these poor hens in these places, and there's no place for them to land. And it has been documented in these scientific welfare studies how many of these cage-free hens have broken and fractured bones because they didn't land properly when they tried to land in a sea of other chickens. So they fractured a wing, they fractured a leg, and again, since these birds really, whether they're in battery cages or cage-free operations, they do not get sufficient calcium. Remember, there's a huge drain upon their bodies to constantly produce eggshells. So they need this constant excessive amount of calcium all the time. So that drains calcium from their bones. And then they don't get enough exercise. So the lack of exercise and the constant demand for calcium from the bones, for the eggs, excuse me, means that their bones are often very brittle anyway. They're not good and strong. Now, if you rescue them and you get them back on the land and they are able to run around and start to exercise and start to scratch in the ground and start to basically, use their bones for the first time in their lives, their bones then become very strong. They're osteoporotic in these operations, whether they're cage-free or battery cage. They have osteoporosis in varying degrees. So anyway, we finally get this visit to the Black Eagle, and we see this unit filled just like the picture that Hope showed a little while ago. All you see is a sea of brown hens. There's no floor space. You can't see anything. The platforms are all filled. They're just, that's how they are. And then finally, this Bob and Ralph Glatt, the owner, was there also. I guess he flew back from Germany just so he could meet us and reassure us that he cared about these hens or something. So finally they said, well, we could go into this, what they call the outdoors part of the winter garden. The winter garden part of the cage-free building. Okay, the winter garden is totally enclosed, and there's no garden except outside the windows. And again, once again, you have the hens looking and seeing all this greenery out there to which they have no access at all. So they're just on a kind of a big wood chips. That's what's on the floor, big wood chips. And these hens, again, you feel so bad. And I tried to describe this in my chapter, how, you're apologizing to them and saying, I'm so sorry. I hope I can convey to you how sorry I am that this has happened to you, that no one's going to rescue you. No one's coming for you. And it's just so evil, and it's so beyond evil. And we asked Bob, who was the sort of tour guide, could we please just take a few of these? We can give them a good home, because he said they're ready to go out, he said. What he means is they're ready to go to slaughter. That was one of the reasons he let us be in, actually walk amongst them, because, you know, they're old hens. They call them old hens or spent hens, even though they're only like under 2 years of age. And they could live 12 years, okay? Average for these types of hens is about 7 years, okay? So they have years of life ahead of them. And for that matter, if just so people know, they lay eggs for years and years after that period of time, but it's not economically feasible to keep them after that period of time, especially when new hens are so cheap. You know, it costs nothing to have like millions of hens. It's totally nothing. So they don't, you know, it's no loss financially, it's a gain. But anyway, so I said, well, I was asking about how they dispose of the hens. He said, well, a lot of times, we just gather them up and we put them in these metal boxes, like maybe a couple hundred hens in these metal boxes. And then we shoot carbon dioxide through hoses into the metal boxes. And I said, yeah, I said, well, that's interesting, because I've read that this cold, freezing cold carbon dioxide being hosed, with great vigor into where these hens are in these metal boxes actually does a combination of freezing and burning their lungs. And it's a horrible death. And I don't know if I said that to him, but I just said, that I understand that this carbon dioxide shot through these hoses into these metal boxes full of hens, both freezes and burns their lungs like simultaneously. And Ralph Glatt said, yeah, I think that's true. And he just says it like, it's just like a joke. So anyway, how much time do I have, Hope? Hope?
Yes.
How much time do I have?
About 15 minutes.
Okay, great.
If you want to take some questions, maybe 10 minutes or something, whatever you want to use 15 minutes for.
Okay, fine. All right.
Okay.
So I got to know the manager who had worked at Black Eagle, and I'm sorry his name escapes me right now, but it's all in the article in the Humane Hoax anthology. And we had several phone calls, very elucidating phone calls. And this man said, look, he said, I'm a farmer, I've knocked pigs, knocked them with a baseball bat or whatever to kill them because they weren't growing fast enough. He said, he reeled off like a bunch of horrible things he's done to animals. He said, but the worst, because that's animal farming, okay? That's just how it is. But he said, but the worst thing I ever saw done to animals was when the Black Eagle farm wanted to dispose of several thousand hens. And he said they were trying to get them into these metal boxes so they could carbon dioxide them to death. He said, but sometimes the hens would come out, and gathering them up was like a difficult undertaking. He said, so Ralph Glatt was there, and he said they had baseball bats and they just started beating them to death with baseball bats. And Ralph Glatt at that time, while that is being done and he's participating, he says, what do we have to do? Beat these hens to death? And they're just all cavalier, and there's no feeling. It's just, again, it's the culture brings out the worst in people. If they have any sensitivities, well, like this man, a former manager, telling me on the phone that, that is used to, as he is, to the brutalities of animal farming, whether it's a family farm or whatever. He said even this got to him, that it was just so brutal. And they just seem to have an orgy of pleasure, just beating these hens to death with baseball bats. So that was Black Eagle. We finally had that final visit in 2011. And at some point, this guy, Bob, the Christian, with the adopted children from other countries, he sent me a picture of where the hens get to go when they go outside. So it's just like a little mud yard. And in fact, I want to mention this too. In the book that was published in 2006, The Way We Eat, I think it's titled, co-authored by Peter Singer and Jim Mason. Okay, Jim Mason visited Pete and Jerry's cage-free, free-range hen operation, free range in New Hampshire. Well, it was Jim who made the actual visit and who understands farming because he grew up on a farm in Missouri. So, and they have a whole chapter on Pete and Jerry's and how all the hens were locked up in the houses. No free-range hens were outdoors at all. And as Jim explains in that chapter, in that book, what hens could go out, what is outside was between each one of these 4 long houses, each with 20,000 hens, adding up to 100,000 hens, was just like a strip of mud between each one. He said, but well, we don't leave the hens out very much, the free range hens. He said, and the US Department of Agriculture is okay with this, because if we let the hens go outside, well, then they might come in contact with the dropping of a wild duck or goose or something. And then if that dropping is contaminated with an avian flu virus, then that could contaminate the flock. So actually, it's better for the free-range hens to be inside all the time. And the USDA, the US Department of Agriculture, accommodates that. So that's another aspect of the whole avian flu. See, avian flu benefits the industry. It's just the opposite of thinking that it's harming the industry. First of all, as we know, who is paying for all of these massacres of all of these, what now, 58 million hens in the United States alone? Who's paying for these massacres, these killing them by heat stroke and suffocation and everything? Who pays for restocking all the houses and rebuilding the houses and cleaning them out and all that kind of stuff? We, the taxpayer. So the industry doesn't lose anything at all. You know, they're not losing anything. They actually make money. And then the so-called free range entrepreneurs, well, now they can keep the hens inside, which they prefer because they don't like to have to gather eggs outside. Hens like to find their own place to lay their eggs. I know that from having hens for all these decades. They like to choose their own places to lay their eggs. Well, that's very inconvenient to the managers. They want the hens to all lay their eggs in the same place and have everything be automated. So that's one of the big advantages of the battery cage system in particular. The only thing I'm going to say in conclusion is talking about the woman named Gina, what was her last name? Gina. Who I discussed at the end of the article, who went to work for a while for a so-called family farm or free-range farm in somewhere, I think it was in Northern California, Gina Warren. And she wrote an essay that appeared in, I think it was The Onion, maybe, publication, called The Chicken Project. And this is so sickening, all right? She talks about, here's the 2 big things that I want to emphasize. One is when she meets the hens in this so-called family farm that's not a factory farm, she says she was just overwhelmed when Cody, the manager or one of the family members, opened the door of where the hens are kept. She said she was knocked over by the ammonia fumes. She said her eyes watered, or they were about to water. She said she felt it, you know, it was just horrible. But she doesn't suggest at all that the reason for this is because Cody doesn't clean the place ever. Because when you can smell the droppings of chickens to the point where the decomposing uric acid in the droppings has become aerial toxic gases in the form of ammonia fumes, that means you're never cleaning up the place. Now, she didn't even she said, well, at least it's not factory farming, but this is a mini factory farm, okay? And she sort of suggested like, well, this is how chickens are, you know, they create all these terrible fumes. But then at the end, when she has a brown hen with her, and she talks how she comforted this hen and made the hen feel really safe and secure. And then when the hen seemed comfortable, she stretched her neck and she cut her throat. And she treats this as like she earned the trust of this hen just so she could kill her. And this Gina this Gina Warren, she's proud of herself that out of this, she and her mother had chicken soup. And she talked about how the eyes of the chicken, and how the hen closed her eyes right before this Gina cut her throat, and I said, well, yeah, you're going to close her eyes forever, and you're getting ready to do this right now, and you're proud of this. See, I'll just say this in conclusion, and I think John Sanbon Mastu's article on women loving, certain types of women just loving to get into the animal slaughter business. It's almost as if there's a sense in which the slaughtering of these animals is a kind of way to get to what they really get off on, which is boasting about their prowess and their comfort, and they're having no problem at all with killing the animals. It's like they want to tell their story. And to tell that story, you have to kill the animals. So it's almost a sense in which killing the animals is a kind of vehicle to the ultimate destination, which is telling my story about what a tough lady I am, that I enjoy killing these animals and I have no problem with it. Again, there is so much psychology, so much twisted psychology in this whole do-it-yourself backyard chicken keeping. And I'll just say one thing. I really urge people to look at, for example, Unparalleled Sufferings article with pictures. Eric Goldberg. He is one of the greatest of all of our photographers, who goes into all of these rural areas and gets this powerful footage, video, as well as photographs. And it's right on our website and on his website, Unparalleled Suffering. And you are seeing this do-it-your-own, what is it called? Do-it-yourself killing groups. You've got a man, usually, who's got a group of people, all enthusiastic. And when he shows how they kill these chickens and turkeys and pigs, I mean, they don't even know what they're doing. They don't even know how to slice their throats properly. And these animals are lying there dying slowly for many, 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 many minutes. And they're writhing in agony, and these people are all happy. And then one of these people who's running this do-it-yourself killing, what do you call it, training sessions or something, he says to one of these young women, hey, I think there's an egg inside this hen. And sure enough, I actually got a treasure out of this hen we just tortured for 20 minutes while she died. I mean, you have to see it. So it's such an abomination to see how happy all these people are, how completely lacking in even the slightest connection to these birds, except that they enjoy the blood, and they enjoy the killing, and they enjoy they're proud of what they're doing. And hey, it's not factory farming, so it's humane or whatever. So I'll close on that note.
Thank you, Karen, so much. So powerful. Everything that you said, it's true. It just covers such a wide, variety of issues, and you touched on so much that was really wonderful. I loved hearing the roosters in the background too.
Yeah, that's Rupert right outside my window. I can't remove him. That's where he lives.
Oh, I love it.
I can't mute him, but he's quiet right now. But he's right out there.
Well, do you want to quickly maybe tell us a story of his story, or any of the roosters, maybe one that came from a humane?
Yeah, I'd be glad to, and especially because this rooster, Rupert, was found by a woman living outside Harrisburg in a little town in Pennsylvania. And she said this is a white leghorn rooster, the typical kind who were used by the US egg industry, the white leghorn chickens. Small, compact, you can fit a lot of them into a battery cage and all that. And they've been bred for small, compact, zillions of eggs. So the roosters were all killed at birth, as we know. They're all ground up alive. But this rooster was found walking along the road all by himself. So this very nice woman, whose name escapes me at the moment, this was like 3 years ago, she walked up to him, and it's like he almost asked to be picked up. She said he just walked up to her and she picked him up. So eventually she learned about United Poultry Concerns, and she drove him about a 6-hour drive. She brought him down here to live here, and he's been here right there in that particular nice enclosure with a little house and everything ever since. He's got his own yard. And now he has 2 nice like white leghorn hens, Rosie and Rita. And but in any case, what I surmise about this rooster and how he ended up walking along the road by himself was he probably was from a family who ordered 12 eggs for backyard chickens, wanting only hens. They ordered only hens, probably, because that's what most of these people do. They're not allowed to have hens, roosters, because they're banned, usually by most municipalities, or they just don't want roosters because they want eggs and they don't want to deal with roosters, period. So I assume that this rooster was cast out by the family when he became like around 5 months old, and it was clear that to this family that he was not a rooster, or that he was not a hen, and they did not want him, or they were not permitted to keep him, so they just set him out there and hoped he would find a home or something. I think that was what happened to him. And again, as has been brought up and will continue to be brought up here and is in the book, people, it's not only the backyard chicken people get rid of the roosters. Once the hens aren't laying enough eggs, or hens are supposed to not lay eggs during the winter, they're supposed to get a biological break. That's nature. But then people get angry. Well, now they're feeding all these hens. But once winter comes, when the days become shorter, the hens lay many fewer eggs, almost none, until the days start to lengthen again in late February. So then people say, well, they're not laying any eggs, but I'm paying all this money for feed. And so, I want to get rid of them. So that's what people do. They get rid of them. They throw them out, or they take them somewhere. So again, the whole backyard chicken keeping thing is just classroom projects. I mean, we hear from so many teachers who say, I hatched these chicks in our classroom. Well, only 3 hatched, and one of them is blind, and the other 2 seem deformed. Can you take them? And if you try to explain to them about all this, sometimes they will listen, but other times they get really angry. Well, our agriculture department said that this was our children love these chickens. That it's like,
yeah, we're going to have to wrap up.
Yeah, I know.
There's so much, I know, and I love your wisdom. I love your stories, and it was really, really wonderful to have you. Thank you so much, and I'm so glad that rooster is safe with you. Yep. He's a lucky one, because most, unfortunately, have a much worse story than that. So,
can anybody see him?
Let's see.
Can he be seen?
Yeah.
That's him.
What a handsome.
That's a selfie with him, and our sanctuary helper, Paul Cronin, took that picture with him.
I love it. I love it.
Rupert loves Paul, and Paul loves Rupert. So yeah, they took that picture. So that's it.
Thank you, Karen, so much. Thank you. All right, we're going to take a short break, just